The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it, and its walls were made of black stone that seemed to swallow light. Delegates from 100 different worlds sat in their assigned places, each species separated by careful distances that prevented conflict. At the center of the room, raised on a platform of polished metal, stood the speaking podium. And at that podium stood High General Vorath of the Krellin Empire, his massive reptilian body casting a shadow across the assembled delegates. Vorath was impressive by any standard. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in scales the color of dried blood. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits, and when he spoke, his forked tongue flickered between words. He wore ceremonial armor that bore the marks of 100 battles, each scratch and dent a story of victory. For too long, Vorath said, his voice echoing through the chamber, we have tolerated the presence of humans in this council. For too long, we have pretended that they deserve a seat among true warrior species. The human delegation sat near the back of the hall, as befitting a species that had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. There were only 3 of them, Ambassador Grace Miller, her assistant Daniel Wright, and a military attach named Captain Kevin Brooks. Grace was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a simple style and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, and she had faced worse than an angry lizard in a fancy room. But even she felt a chill as Vorath's gaze found her. Humans do not fight, Vorath continued. They hide behind their machines. They send drones instead of soldiers. They negotiate when they should conquer. They retreat when they should stand and die with honor. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The insectoid Vrix clicked their mandibles in what passed for applause among their kind. The crystalline Tauren, beings of living stone, pulsed with colors that indicated approval. Even the peaceful Mindori, a species of telepaths who rarely took sides in political matters, seemed to nod their bulbous heads. The humans are cowards, Vorath declared, slamming his armored fist against the podium. They are unworthy of respect. They are unworthy of alliance. They are unworthy of this council. Grace felt Daniel shift uncomfortably beside her. Kevin's hand moved toward his sidearm before he caught himself. But Grace remained still, her face showing nothing. This was not a surprise. The Krellins had been building toward this moment for months. They had raided human colony outposts, destroying property and taking prisoners. They had insulted human delegates at every opportunity. They had tested and prodded and pushed, waiting to see how humanity would respond. The Galactic Council operated on a simple principle. Strength demanded respect. Species that could not defend themselves were not worth protecting. The Krellins believed that humanity's reluctance to engage in open warfare was proof of weakness, and they intended to use that perceived weakness to strip humanity of its council seat. I call for a vote, Vorath said. I call for the removal of humanity from this council. Let them crawl back to their single planet and trouble us no more. Grace rose from her seat. The movement was small, but in the vast silence of the chamber, it drew every eye. The human delegation requests the right to respond, she said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily to every corner of the room. Vorath's lips pulled back from his teeth in what might have been a smile. By all means, Ambassador, speak your piece. Tell us why we should not cast you out like the vermin you are. Grace walked slowly toward the central platform. She was aware of how small she must look. This tiny human woman approaching the massive Krellin general. She used that. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. General Vorath, she said, you have called humanity cowards. You have pointed to our reluctance to engage in direct combat as proof of our weakness. Because it is proof, Vorath interrupted. A true warrior does not hide. A true warrior does not send machines to fight his battles. A true warrior faces his enemy and defeats him or dies trying. And that is where you have made your mistake, Grace said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Even Vorath seemed taken aback by the certainty in her voice. You believe that our restraint is weakness, Grace continued. You believe that because we choose not to fight, we cannot fight. You believe that because we value the lives of our soldiers, we have no soldiers worth valuing. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small communication device. It was a simple thing, no larger than her palm, but something about the way she held it made the delegates uneasy. 18 months ago, your forces began raiding our outer colonies. You destroyed supply stations. You captured civilian vessels. You took 47 of our people prisoner and have held them ever since, promising to execute them unless we prove ourselves worthy of combat. And you have done nothing, Vorith said. You have sent diplomats and negotiators. You have filed protests and complaints. You have behaved exactly as cowards behave. We're giving you a chance, Grace said. We were hoping you would see reason. We were hoping we would not have to do what we are about to do. She pressed a button on the device. General Vorath. In accordance with the United Human Coalition's protocols for sustained harassment and insult to human honor, we are formally responding to your aggression. We are sending someone to meet you, Vorath laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Another diplomat? Another negotiator? Perhaps this time you will send someone who can actually look me in the eye. His name is Colonel Nathan Cole, Grace said. He is not a diplomat. The name meant nothing to most of the delegates. But in the corner of the chamber, a Tauran historian who had spent decades studying human military conflicts suddenly went very still. His crystalline body, normally bright with swirling colors, faded to a pale gray. Who is this Nathan Cole? Voreth demanded. Some politician? Some bureaucrat with a fancy title? Grace smiled. It was not a warm smile. Colonel Cole is what we call a strategic asset. He belongs to a program that officially does not exist. Trained by methods that are classified above any clearance level you have ever heard of. He has ended wars single-handedly. He has walked into enemy strongholds alone and walked out days later as the only living thing for miles. She paused, letting her words sink in. You wanted to see what human warriors look like, General? You wanted proof that we are not cowards. Colonel Cole has volunteered to provide that proof personally. Vorith leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. You are sending one man? Against the might of the Krellin Empire? We are sending one man, Grace confirmed. Because one man is all we need. And when he is finished, General, you will understand exactly why humanity chooses peace whenever possible. She turned and began walking back to her seat. We are not cowards, General Vorath. We simply prefer not to unleash what we have created. But you have forced our hand. You have poked the sleeping beast one too many times. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap, as if nothing unusual had happened. May whatever gods you worship have mercy on your soldiers. Because Colonel Cole will not. The chamber erupted in noise, delegates shouting questions and demanding explanations. But Grace sat quietly, her eyes fixed on Vorith's face. She watched the confusion there, the anger, the first small seed of doubt. He did not understand yet. None of them did, but they would. Very soon, they would understand everything. The facility had no name. It did not appear on any map, any record, any database that could be accessed by anyone below the highest levels of human government. It was buried 3 miles beneath the frozen surface of Europa, hidden under layers of ice and rock and secrets. Inside the facility, rows of cryopods lined the walls like coffins standing upright. Each pod contained a human being, kept in frozen sleep until they were needed. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were something else entirely, something that humanity had spent centuries perfecting and decades trying to forget. Commander Lisa Park walked down the row of pods, her footsteps echoing in the cold silence. She was a tall woman with black hair, cut short and practical. And she moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent her entire career in military service. But even she felt nervous as she approached pod number 7. The nameplate on the pod read simply, Cole. Nisa checked the readouts one more time. Heart rate stable. Brain activity normal. All systems green. She took a deep breath and pressed the activation sequence. The pod hissed as the seals released. Frost cracked and fell away from the viewing window. Inside, a man opened his eyes. Nathan Cole did not look like a weapon. He was not particularly tall, perhaps 5 feet 10 inches, with a lean build that suggested a runner rather than a fighter. His face was plain, the kind of face that would blend into any crowd. His brown hair was cut short, and his eyes were a pale gray that seemed to hold no particular emotion. He sat up slowly, his body remembering how to move after 3 years of frozen sleep. He did not ask where he was or what had happened. Men like Nathan Cole did not waste time on unnecessary questions. "Welcome back, Colonel," Lisa said. "How do you feel?" Nathan flexed his hands, testing his muscles. "Funked." "Ional, brief me." Lisa handed him a tablet containing his mission files. "The Krellin Empire has been harassing our outer colonies for the past 18 months. They have taken 47 human prisoners and are holding them at a fortified listening post in the Kepler system. Yesterday, their High General publicly called humanity cowards in front of the entire Galactic Council." Nathan scrolled through the files, his eyes moving quickly over the information. "And the Coalition's response?" "You, sir. You are the response." He nodded as if this was perfectly normal, as if being awakened from frozen sleep to single-handedly confront an alien empire was just another day at work. For Nathan Cole, it was. The Strategic Asset Program had begun over a century ago. During the darkest days of the Solar Wars, humanity had nearly destroyed itself in those years. And the governments that survived realized they needed something new. They needed soldiers who were not just trained but engineered. Not just disciplined, but perfected. Nathan was the product of that program. He had been selected before birth, his genetic profile chosen from thousands of candidates for its combination of physical capability, mental stability, and psychological resilience. He had been raised in facilities like this one, trained from the moment he could walk in every form of combat humanity had ever devised, by the time he was 20. He had killed more enemies than most soldiers saw in a lifetime. By 30, he had ended 3 separate conflicts that threatened to tear humanity apart. Now, at 45 years of physical age, he was considered the most dangerous individual the human species had ever produced. "Tell me about the Krellins," he said, stepping out of the pod. Lisa pulled up holographic displays showing the alien species in detail. The Krellins were reptilian, covered in thick scales that could deflect most ballistic weapons. They averaged 7 feet in height and possessed physical strength far beyond human capability. Their culture was built around concepts of martial honor and personal combat. "They consider retreat to be the ultimate disgrace," Lisa explained. "Their warriors fight to the death in almost all circumstances. Surrender is viewed as worse than dying. Combat doctrine? Direct assault. Overwhelming force. They view tactical maneuvering as a form of cowardice. Their standard approach is to identify the enemy's strongest point and attack it head-on until one side is destroyed." Nathan studied the images for a moment. "Predictable, sir." "Species that value honor over victory are predictable," Nathan said. "They will always do what they consider brave, even if it is tactically foolish. That makes them easy to manipulate." He walked to the armory section of the facility, where racks of weapons and equipment lined the walls. Lisa followed, watching as he examined his options with the careful attention of a craftsman selecting tools. "The listening post where the prisoners are held is defended by approximately 800 Krellin warriors," she said. "It is built into an asteroid in the Kepler system and is heavily fortified. The Krellins are expecting a fleet engagement. They want to demonstrate their military superiority in open combat." Nathan selected a combat knife, its blade made of a ceramic composite that could cut through Krellin scales. He added a silenced pistol, several small explosive charges, a case of specialized equipment that Lisa did not recognize. "Should we prepare a strike team?" Lisa asked. "We have other assets available," Nathan shook his head. "The Krellins want to see a human warrior. Sending a fleet proves nothing, except that we have more ships than they expected. Sending a team suggests we need numbers to fight their numbers." He began suiting up, pulling on black tactical armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Sending one man tells them something else entirely," he continued. It tells them that we are so confident in our abilities that a single soldier is sufficient for 800 of their best warriors. Lisa watched him prepare. Trying to reconcile what she knew about this man with what she was seeing, he moved with calm efficiency, no wasted motion, no hesitation. He showed no fear, no excitement, nothing that suggested he understood he was about to face nearly 1,000 enemy combatants alone. "Colonel," she said carefully, "I have read your file. I know what you are capable of. But 800 soldiers, even against someone of your abilities, the odds seem insurmountable." Nathan finished suiting up and turned to face her. For a moment, something flickered in those pale gray eyes, something that might have been amusement. "Commander, the Krellans think they understand war. They think war is about strength and courage and dying gloriously in battle. They are wrong." He picked up his knife, testing its weight. "War is about winning. Nothing else matters. Honor is a luxury for those who can afford it. Fairness is a concept invented by the weak to limit the strong. The only rule of war is that there are no rules." He slid the knife into its sheath. "The Krellans will expect me to fight like they fight, to meet their strength with strength. They will expect me to announce myself, to challenge their warriors, to give them the honorable battle they crave." Smile crossed his face. "Small and cold. I am going to disappear into their fortress like smoke. I am going to kill them one by one in the darkness. I am going to make them fear shadows and jump at sounds. And when I am finished, the survivors will spend the rest of their lives wondering if the monster they glimpsed in the dark was real or imagined." He picked up the rest of his equipment and walked toward the hangar where his ship waited. Krellans wanted to meet a human warrior, Commander. They wanted proof that we are not cowards. I am going to give them exactly what they asked for." Lisa watched him go, this unremarkable-looking man who moved like a predator and spoke like death itself. She had served in the military for 20 years. She had seen combat. She had known warriors, but she had never known anything like Nathan Cole. As his ship lifted off and disappeared into the frozen sky, she found herself feeling something she had not expected. Pity not for Nathan Cole, for the 800 Krellan. Soldiers who had no idea what was coming for them. The Krellan listening post had been built to withstand a full military assault. It sat in the heart of an asteroid field, surrounded by patrol ships and defense platforms. Its walls were meters thick, reinforced with materials that could resist orbital bombardment. Its sensors could detect approaching vessels from millions of kilometers away. General Vorith had personally overseen its fortification after capturing the human prisoners. He wanted the rescue attempt to come. He wanted to demonstrate once and for all the Krellan Empire was superior to the pathetic humans who cowered behind their machines. He was expecting a fleet. He was expecting warships and soldiers and the full might of human military power. What he got was Nathan Cole. Nathan's insertion craft was barely larger than an escape pod. It had no weapons, no shields, nothing that would appear threatening on a sensor display. It drifted through the asteroid field on minimal power, using the rocks themselves as cover, moving so slowly that it barely registered against the background. Radiation of space. It took him 14 hours to reach the asteroid. 14 hours of careful maneuvering, of patience, of waiting for the right moment to slip past each patrol. Most soldiers would have gone mad from the tension. Nathan used the time to review the facility blueprints and plan his approach. He landed on the dark side of the asteroid. In a crater that shielded his craft from sensor detection, he maglocked the ship to the surface and stepped out into the vacuum of space, his suit protecting him from the cold and the void. The facility's exterior was patrolled by Krellan sentries in environmental suits. Nathan counted their patterns, timed their movements, identified the gaps in their coverage. Then he began to move. The first sentry was watching the stars, scanning for the fleet that would never come. He never saw the shadow that rose behind him, never felt the blade that slipped between the seals of his suit and found the soft tissue beneath. Nathan caught the body before it could drift away and secured it in the shadows of a rock formation. One down. 799 to go. Nathan found in maintenance airlock that the Krellans had not bothered to heavily guard. Why would they? No enemy force could reach this point without fighting through their patrols first. He bypassed the security in 60 seconds and slipped inside. The interior of the facility was warm and humid, designed for Krellan comfort. The air smelled of reptile musk and metal. Nathan moved through the corridors like a ghost, his black armor blending with the shadows between the harsh overhead lights. He had studied the Krellan language during his approach. He could not speak it fluently, but he could understand the signs on the walls, the directions they pointed. He made his way deeper into the facility, avoiding patrols, noting positions, building a mental map of his hunting ground. The first hour passed. 17 Krellans died without ever seeing their killer. Nathan used the ventilation system to move between levels, dropping down behind sentries and disappearing before their bodies hit the floor. He hid the corpses in storage rooms, in maintenance tunnels, and anywhere they would not be immediately discovered. His knife was his primary weapon. It was silent, efficient, and personal. Each kill was quick and clean, a single strike to the vulnerable points that every species possessed. The Krellan's scales were tough, but their joints were weak. Their eyes were sensitive. Their throats were exposed when they turned their heads. Nathan learned their vulnerabilities and exploited them without mercy. By the second hour, the Krellans began to notice something was wrong. Warriors who should have reported in had gone silent. Patrols that should have passed certain checkpoints had never arrived. The base commander, a scarred veteran named Crowther, ordered an investigation. "Find the malfunction in our communications," he growled to his subordinates. "Some fool has probably damaged a relay, but it was not a communications malfunction. It was something far worse." Nathan watched from the shadows as search parties spread through the facility. They moved in pairs, weapons drawn, their reptilian eyes scanning for threats. They checked rooms and corridors and found nothing but silence, and then they began to find the bodies. The first discovery was in a storage compartment on level 3. 2 warriors opened the door expecting to find supplies and instead found 6 of their comrades stacked like cordwood, their throats cut, their eyes staring at nothing. One of the warriors let out a howl of rage. The other triggered an alarm. Within minutes, the entire facility was on alert. 800 warriors scrambled for their weapons, forming defensive positions, searching for the enemy that had somehow infiltrated their fortress without detection. Nathan did not slow down. He did not hide. He adapted. The Krellans were no longer separated and vulnerable. They traveled in groups, covered each other's movements, maintained constant communication. A lesser opponent would have been forced to retreat or engage in open combat. Nathan simply changed his approach. He began targeting the stragglers, the warriors who fell behind their groups or stepped aside to investigate a noise. He used the Krellan's own fear against them, making sounds in empty corridors to draw them away from their companions. He set traps using their own equipment, explosions that killed warriors and destroyed lights, plunging sections of the facility into darkness. In the darkness, the Krellans were blind. Their eyes were adapted for the bright light of their home world. In the shadows, they stumbled and bumped into walls and jumped at every sound. Nathan moved through that darkness like he was born to it. By the third hour, the Krellan death toll had passed 100. The survivors were no longer searching for an intruder. They were fighting for their lives against an enemy they could not see, could not understand, could not stop. Commander Crowther gathered his remaining forces in the central command chamber. They barricaded the doors and set up defensive positions, weapons pointed at every entrance. They were warriors, trained from birth for combat, and they would not die cowering in corners. But even as they prepared their defense, Crowther felt something he had never experienced in decades of warfare: fear. "What manner of creature is this?" One of his subordinates whispered. "How can one being kill so many of us?" "It is human," Crowther said. "Nothing more. Humans are weak. Humans are soft. Humans are prey." But even as he said the words, he did not believe them. The sensor logs showed a single small craft landing on the asteroid. One craft. One pilot. One human. One human had killed over 100 Krellin warriors in 3 hours without being seen, without being heard, without leaving a single trace except corpses. This was not how prey behaved. This was how predators behaved. This was how nightmares behaved. "Seal all doors," Crowther ordered. "No one leaves this room until reinforcements arrive." His warriors obeyed, but their movements were jerky with fear. They kept glancing at the shadows, at the ventilation grates, at any opening where death might slip through, and somewhere in the darkness of the facility, Nathan Cole continued his work. He was not tired. He was not afraid. He was not even particularly interested in the Krellins. He was killing. They were simply obstacles between him and his objective. The human prisoners were somewhere in this facility, and he would reach them. Nothing would stop him. Not 800 warriors. Not fortified walls. Not the entire Krellin Empire. Nathan had been created for moments like this. He had been trained to be the thing that monsters feared. And tonight, the Krellins were learning exactly why humanity kept men like him in frozen sleep. Because when the Boogeyman woke up, no one was safe. General Voreth received the transmission on his flagship, the Pride of Krella, while orbiting the Empire's homeworld. He had been in a meeting with his war council, planning the next phase of their campaign against humanity, when an emergency signal interrupted their discussion. "What is it?" Voreth demanded. "I ordered no interruptions." "Apologies, General," his communications officer stammered. "There is a transmission from the Kepler listening post. Priority 1. The commander says it is urgent beyond measure." Voreth gestured impatiently. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Commander Crowther. The warrior looked like he had aged 20 years since Voreth had last seen him. His scales were pale, his eyes were wide, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "General, we are under attack." Voreth leaned forward. "How many ships? What is their fleet composition?" "No ships, General." "No fleet." Crowther's voice cracked. "One human. One single human has infiltrated the facility. He has killed over 400 of our warriors." The War Council erupted in disbelief. Krellin generals shouted questions and accusations. Some insisted it was impossible. Others demanded to know how the human had breached their defenses. Voreth silenced them with a raised hand. "Show me." Crowther transmitted footage from the facility's security systems. The War Council watched in horrified silence as the recordings played out. The footage showed corridors and chambers, each one containing dead Krellins. Bodies lay where they had fallen, killed by blade or by garrote or by bare hands. The kills were surgical, precise, each one targeting the vulnerable points of Krellin, anatomy with perfect accuracy. But the most disturbing thing was what the footage did not show. The human himself appeared only in glimpses. A shadow moving in the corner of a frame. A blur of motion that was there and then gone. In one recording, a Krellin warrior turned toward a sound, raised his weapon, and then simply collapsed. His throat cut by something that had moved too fast for the camera to capture. "Is this possible?" one of the generals whispered. "How can one creature do this?" Voreth said nothing. He watched the footage with growing unease. Seeing something that his council had not yet recognized, the human was not just killing Krellins. He was hunting them. He was using their own behavior against them, predicting their movements, exploiting their patterns. Every death had been planned. Every attack calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum risk. This was not the work of a berserker or a madman. This was the work of a professional, a craftsman, a predator who had studied his prey and found them wanting. General Crowther said, his voice barely above a whisper, "What do we do? Our warriors are trapped in the central chamber. They are too afraid to leave. The human has cut power to most of the facility. He controls the darkness, and in the darkness, we cannot see him. How many warriors remain? Perhaps 350. The rest are dead or missing." Voreth felt something cold settle in his stomach. 450 Krellin warriors, each one trained from birth for combat, had been killed by a single human in less than 6 hours. "The prisoners," Voreth said. "What is their status?" "Still alive as far as we know. The human has not yet reached the detention level, and he is coming for them. He is clearing a path. Voreth turned to his war council. This is what the humans sent in response to my challenge. Not a fleet. Not an army. A single warrior. Coward, one of the generals spat. He hides in shadows and strikes from behind. This is not honorable combat. No, Voreth said slowly. It is not. But it is effective. He stared at the frozen image on the display, a split-second capture of the human moving through a doorway. The figure was small, unremarkable, nothing that would draw attention in a crowd. And yet this small, unremarkable creature had carved a bloody path through hundreds of Krellin elite. We called them cowards, Voreth said. We mocked them for avoiding direct combat. We believed their restraint was weakness. He turned to face his council. We were wrong. Before anyone could respond, the transmission from Crather cut out. For a moment, there was only static. Then a new face appeared on the screen. It was the human. He looked exactly as unremarkable as he had in the security footage. Brown hair, gray eyes, features that would be forgotten the moment you looked away. He was not large or muscular. He did not look like a warrior, but his eyes held something that made every Krellin in the war room instinctively want to step back. General Voroth, the human said. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. My name is Colonel Nathan Cole. I believe you wanted to meet a human warrior. Voroth forced himself to remain steady. You are the one they sent? You are their response to my challenge? I am the response, Nathan confirmed. Though I should clarify something, I did not come here to challenge you. I did not come here to prove humanity's courage or to engage in honorable combat. Then why did you come? I came to deliver a message. Behind Nathan, the surviving Krellin warriors were visible, huddled against the walls of the command chamber. Their weapons lay abandoned on the floor. Their eyes were fixed on the human with a terror that Voroth had never seen in Krellin faces before. The message is simple, Nathan continued. You called humanity cowards. You believed that our reluctance to engage in open warfare was evidence of weakness. You were wrong. He stepped closer to the camera, and his gray eyes seemed to look directly into Voroth's soul. We are not cowards, General. We are patient. We choose our battles carefully. We develop weapons and tactics that minimize our own casualties while maximizing enemy losses. We value the lives of our soldiers, so we have trained a few of us to do the work of thousands. You hide in shadows, Voroth said. You strike from behind. This is not the behavior of warriors. Keep using that word, Nathan said. Warriors. As if it means something. As if it changes the reality of what has happened here. He gestured at the Krellins behind him. Your warriors are dead, General. 462 of them, killed by a single man with a knife. Not because they were weak or poorly trained. Because they fought the way you taught them to fight. And I fought the way humanity taught me to fight. Nathan's voice remained calm. But something in it hardened. Your warriors stood in the light and announced themselves. I moved through the darkness in silence. Your warriors faced me directly and died. I attacked from angles they never expected and disappeared before they could respond. Your warriors died with honor. I killed with efficiency. He shook his head slowly. Honor did not save them. Courage did not save them. Nothing saved them because they were facing something they did not understand. And what is that? Voroth demanded. What are you? Nathan smiled. It was a cold smile, empty of warmth or humor. I am the reason humanity has survived every war we have ever fought. I am what happens when a species spends millions of years as prey and then decides to become predators. I am the monster that humanity keeps locked away until we have no other choice. He leaned closer to the camera. There are others like me, General. Hundreds of us, sleeping in frozen vaults across human space. We are your war council's worst nightmare given flesh. We are the Boogeyman. The transmission flickered and Nathan's face filled the screen. The 47 human prisoners in this facility are now under my protection. You will not harm them. You will not threaten them. You will return them to human space uninjured, along with a formal apology to the Galactic Council. And if I refuse? Voroth asked. Then I will come for you next, Nathan said. Not with a fleet, not with an army, just me, alone, in the night. And I promise you, General, what I did to this facility will seem merciful compared to what I will do to you. The transmission held for a moment longer, long enough for Vorath to see his own reflection in the human's empty gray eyes. Then the screen went dark, the news spread across the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. Within days, every species in the Galactic Council had heard some version of the story. A single human soldier had infiltrated a fortified Krellin military installation and killed nearly 500 warriors without being captured or killed himself. Some called it propaganda. Some called it exaggeration. Some called it impossible. But the Krellins knew the truth. They had seen the bodies. They had watched the security footage. They had spoken to the survivors. Warriors who had been reduced to trembling wrecks by a single night in the dark with a human predator. General Vorath received the formal request for a council session 3 days after Nathan's transmission. He had spent those 3 days locked in his quarters, reviewing the footage. Trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong, he had been so certain. The humans were soft, weak, unwilling to fight. Their reliance on technology and tactics was proof of their cowardice. A true warrior species would have faced the Krellins directly, would have matched strength against strength and died with honor. Instead, the humans had sent a ghost, a shadow, a nightmare in human form. Vorath traveled to the council chamber personally. He could have sent a subordinate, could have hidden from the humiliation that awaited him, but he was still Krellin. He would face the consequences of his actions with whatever dignity remained. The Great Hall was packed when he arrived. Every species in the council had sent representatives. The observation galleries were filled with diplomats and journalists and curious observers. They had come to see the mighty Krellin Empire brought low. Ambassador Grace Miller stood at the central podium. She looked exactly as she had during their last encounter, small and calm and utterly unafraid. But now, Vorath saw her differently. Now he understood that her calm was not the passivity of prey. It was the patience of a predator that knew it could strike whenever it chose. The Galactic Council recognizes Ambassador Grace Miller of the United Human Coalition, the moderator announced. You may present your statement. Grace nodded and addressed the assembly. 3 days ago, Colonel Nathan Cole of the Strategic Asset. Program successfully completed his mission at the Krellin listening post in the Kepler system. 47 human prisoners were recovered unharmed. 462 Krellin military personnel were killed in the operation. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. Colonel Cole operated alone. He received no support from any human military vessel. He carried only standard infantry equipment. His mission lasted approximately 8 hours from initial insertion to extraction. The chamber murmured. Even species that had heard the reports seemed shocked by the official confirmation. I present this information not to boast, Grace continued, but to correct a misunderstanding. General Vorath called humanity cowards. He believed our reluctance to engage in direct warfare was evidence of weakness. He was mistaken. She turned to face Vorath directly. Humanity has not survived on Earth for millions of years by being weak. We have survived because we are adaptable. We learn. We evolve. We develop new strategies and new weapons and new ways of fighting that our enemies cannot predict. We value peace because we understand the cost of war. We prefer diplomacy because we know what happens when diplomacy fails. And when we are forced to fight, we fight to win. Not for honor. Not for glory. For survival, Grace gestured toward the data displays, showing the aftermath of Nathan's mission. General Vorath asked to see what human warriors look like. Colonel Cole showed him. Now the general understands what we have been trying to explain since we first joined this council. She faced the assembled delegates. Humanity does not want war. We do not enjoy violence. We do not seek conquest or domination. But make no mistake, we are capable of defending ourselves. We have weapons and soldiers and tactics that most species cannot imagine. We have kept them hidden because we hoped we would never need them. The Krellin harassment of our colonies ends today. The prisoners taken by Krellin forces have been returned. General Vorath will issue a formal apology for his remarks about human cowardice. Grace paused. And this matter will be considered closed. We do not seek revenge or retribution. We seek only to be treated with the same respect that every council member deserves. She gathered her materials and stepped away from the podium. Then she stopped, as if remembering something.
One more thing.
Several delegates have asked about Colonel Cole's current status. I want to assure everyone that the colonel has been returned to reserve status. He is sleeping, waiting, as he has always done. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with delegates from a dozen different species. We hope he remains asleep for a very long time. But he is there. He is always there. And if anyone threatens humanity again, he and others like him will wake up. The chamber was silent as Grace returned to her seat. The moderator cleared his throat. General Vorath, do you wish to respond? Vorath rose slowly. He was still massive, still armored, still bearing the marks of 100 victories. But something in his bearing had changed. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. I formally apologize, he said, the words seeming to cost him physical pain. I called humanity cowards. I was wrong. Humanity is not cowardly. They are simply different from what we expected. He paused, struggling with what he wanted to say. The Krellin Empire values strength and honor in direct combat. We believed these were the only measures of a warrior species. We did not understand that strength can come in many forms. We did not understand that there are ways of fighting that do not match our traditions but are equally effective. He looked at Grace. One human killed nearly 500 of my warriors. Not through luck or trickery, but through skill and patience and a kind of warfare we had never encountered. I have watched the recordings of that night many times. I have tried to understand how it was possible. I do not understand, Vorath admitted, but I accept that it happened, and I will not make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. He sat down heavily, and the chamber erupted in conversation. Delegates whispered to each other, comparing notes, revising their assessments of the small species from the third planet of an unremarkable star. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy's perception of humanity shifted dramatically. Trade delegations that had previously been dismissive now approached with respect. Military powers that had considered humans easy targets quietly adjusted their strategic calculations. The Vriks stopped their border provocations. The Tauren requested formal military consultations. Grace Miller received a promotion and a medal. She continued her work as if nothing had changed, attending sessions and negotiating treaties and representing humanity's interests with quiet competence and deep beneath the ice of Europa. Nathan Cole slept. His mission was complete. The message had been delivered. The galaxy understood now what humanity was capable of, and that understanding would prevent more conflicts than any fleet of warships. Nathan did not dream. The cryosleep was too deep for dreams. But if he could have dreamed, he might have seen a galaxy that no longer mistook human kindness for weakness. A galaxy that understood that peace was a choice, not an inevitability. A galaxy that knew what slept beneath the ice, waiting for the day when it would be needed again. The Boogeyman was patient. The Boogeyman could wait forever if necessary, but the Boogeyman never forgot. And that was the real message that Nathan Cole had delivered to the Krellin Empire and to every other species watching. Humanity did not need to fight every battle. They did not need to prove themselves in every conflict. They simply needed to demonstrate clearly and unmistakably what happened when someone pushed them too far. One man, one night. Nearly 500 dead, the galaxy would remember. The galaxy would be careful, and humanity would continue doing what it had always done. Surviving, adapting, growing stronger with each generation. Not because they were the strongest species in the galaxy. Not because they were the most aggressive or the most warlike. Because they were the most determined. Because they never gave up. Because they had learned over millions of years of evolution that the thing which makes a species truly dangerous is not claws or teeth or venom. It is the will to survive at any cost and humanity had that will in abundance. The end.